Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible with the usual crew. And Lawrence, what is the prequel, the format of this chapter we're going to be doing?
Well, format, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that, but
Well, give us a description.
okay, so we're talking about the Nazarite vow today, and this is probably a fairly ancient Jewish tradition. It goes back further than Numbers by quite a bit. I think there's even a bit in Amos about it. It's also in Judges because Samson is called a Nazir. And sorry for any mispronunciations. So the thing is, this comes from somewhere. This is kind of not just establishing, but also slightly changing an existent tradition, that being of the Nazarites, and they're kind of this group of holy men, right? They are separate from the priests, but they are recognized by the priesthood. So yeah, that's what we're talking about today. Their vows, some of their practices. Yeah.
So this parts of this is part of Numbers that comes from somewhere else that's older than Numbers. You make it almost sound as if Moses didn't write all of this in one go.
What? Almost as if he didn't write any of it. Yeah, this. So in
No.
Amos,
We've established this. God reached down and used Moses' brain like a typewriter, and he just did all of this stuff.
A very gooey typewriter. Ugh.
Meat computers are hard to use.
They are.
Yeah, Amos was written in probably the I guess the 8th century or maybe late 7th century BCE, and Judges. Well, it's kind of hard to tell from the Deuteronomistic history because that one may have been written in stages. There are a good amount of reasons to think that. There are multiple books written on this subject as well, and some of the arguments get pretty detailed and complicated, or some of the reconstructions do at least. But that one could have been written in stages, and it still, in my view, precedes Numbers. So at least textually speaking. So I think that Numbers was kind of like a solidification for that tradition, and like I said, there's one quite large change in it. So as opposed to the other traditions. So that's what we should expect today.
Okay.
Also,
and who's reading today?
I found out that one of my favorite bands, Ruskaya, is they broke up. And they broke up because they were a satirization of like the Soviet Union. And when Russia started its invasion of Ukraine, they were like, okay, we can't keep satirizing Russia. So they broke up, and I'm bummed about it. Like, I get it, but I'm bummed about it.
Fucking Putin ruined everything.
He really did.
It's 1991 all over again.
Worst.
Ruska is a polka metal band.
What?
Okay. Metal. It's great. It's so good. Oh, so bummed.
I was doing Lawrence. When Russia invaded Ukraine, I was practicing Russian language for an hour every day, and I had been for months. And it was, I mean, it was to the point where I could watch Russian movies and pick out like large portions of. Well, not large portions. I'm able to pick out bits and like almost to the point where I can understand, a high degree of what's being said. And I just couldn't do it anymore. Putin fucking ruined it. Putin ruined Russian.
Learn Ukrainian. That's what I say.
It's basically absolutely. Russian with an I. I think that's the only difference in there.
Some of it will carry over.
It's Russian, but it's just there's an extra letter.
That's how I learned about Saint Olga.
I'm sorry to be interjecting. I feel like we're diverging too much.
We just started. We're allowed to diverge at the beginning.
Well, we did have a question.
Part of Russian language and Putin is not related to the Bible.
Russia, Nazarite.
Do not get me into the beasts and the bear and the kingdom of the north and shit. I will find you some Christian ways that Putin is mentioned in Revelations and is part of the end times prophecy. And he's going to ultimately be part of the effort to destroy Israel, but God will magically protect them, and then the end will be nigh.
And speaking of delaying the show, you did have a request in the chat. If you could go through all of the animals that you have in the back. I pointed out that we only have 2 hours. So
Yeah. I'm going to be doing a show with
Yes,
Intrepid
yeah.
Exotics after this at 3:00 this afternoon. I'm going to be guesting with him for a change of pace where he and I will get to talk about snakes. But we're not doing that now.
cool.
Yeah, so stick around and see more snacks.
Yep. Yeah. So who's reading today?
I could start reading today, but that's all right. I'm guessing. That's all
Yeah,
right. Number 6.
read up to 21.
21. Okay. All right. This is my crazy book again. The Jerusalem Bible is a Catholic one. All right. Yahweh spoke to Moses and said, "Say, this is the sons of Israel. If a man or a woman wishes to make a vow, the vow of the Nazarite by which he is pledged to Yahweh, he shall abstain from wine and strong drink, and neither drink the juice of the grapes, nor eat the grapes, fresh or dried. For the duration of his vow, he shall touch nothing that comes from the vine, not even verjuice or lees. As long
Don't touch
as
their juice.
Nope, touch their juice.
No grape
Let my
juice.
people go. Oh wait, that's a different type of juice. As long as he is bound by his vow, no razor shall touch his head until the time of the consecration of Yahweh is completed. He remains under vow and shall let his hair grow free. For the entire period of the consecration of Yahweh, he must not go near a corpse. He must not make himself unclean for either father or mother, for neither brother nor sister, should they die. On his head he carries the consecration of his God. Throughout the whole of his Nazarite, he is a person consecrated to Yahweh. If anyone dies suddenly in his presence, and so makes his consecrated hair unclean, he must shave his head on the day of the cleansing, and he must shave his head on the 7th day. On the 8th day, he is to bring his turtle doves and 2 young pigeons to this priest. We don't want no sparrows now. At the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest must offer one as a sacrifice for sin and the other as a holocaust. He must then perform over this man the rite of atonement and the defilement that he has contracted from said corpse. The man must then consecrate his head that same day. He must consecrate himself to Yahweh for the period of his Nazarene. And at the same, he must be a male youngling lamb to sacrifice of reparation. The time already spent shall not count, since his hair has become unclean. I have no idea what the hell this is. This is the ritual to be followed by the Nazarite on the day of his period of consecration is completed. He is said to have led to the entrance of the tent of meeting, that's capital letters by the way, and must make his offering to Yahweh for holocaust, a male yearling lamb without blemish for sacrifice for sin, a yearling ewe lamb without blemish for communion sacrifice, a ram without blemish, and a basket of unweaving loaves made of fine floured mixed with oil. Kind of sounds tasty. And of unleavened wafers, spread with oil, and the obligations and liberations appropriated to them.
So when they say oil, are they talking butter?
No oil, just regular old oil.
Gotta wish it was butter.
I'm assuming olive oil.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. When he has brought all of this before Yahweh, the priest must offer the sacrifice for sin of the holocaust of the Nazarite, and the Nazarite must then offer up communion sacrifice, that's a hard word, with the ram and the unraveled bread in a basket. And then the priest, excuse me, I'm reading, excuse me, I'm on stream. And the priest must then offer the company obligation of libation. Excuse me, guys, that's embarrassing. Then the Nazarite shall shave off his consecrated penning obligation and libation. The Nazarite will then shave off his consecrated hair at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and taking the locks of his consecrated head, he shall put them in the fire of the communion sacrifice. The priest is to take his shoulder of the ram, and as soon as it is cooked, with an unleavened cake from the basket and an unleavened wafer, he is to put them into the hands of Nazarite, and when the Nazarite has shaved off his hair, with them he must make the gesture of offering before Yahweh, as it is a holy thing. And it reverts to the priest in the gesture of the offering before Yahweh. I already said that. In addition to the breast that has been presented as thigh, my God, this is difficult to read, that has been set aside after the Nazarite may once more drink wine. Help. Such is the ritual of the Nazarite. If, besides the hair, he is also vowed a personal offering to Yahweh, he must, apart from anything else by this means, follow and allow to fulfill the vow that he has made, in addition to what the ritual prescribes for his hair. So I have the last bit here, the form of blessing.
Yeah, that's
Yahweh.
the second part.
Let's stop.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
we'll
as
stop
I said,
right
Okay.
before the
That's
end
a-
then.
I am sorry
particularly-
for messing that up, but holy mackerel, I couldn't
I think that's
understand
a-
half of that.
So
That's a
we have
particularly bad
all this
translation.
specificity for this thing. There's nowhere in the Bible does it describe the true nature of the earth and the rest of the relation to the rest of the cosmos. Nowhere does it tell you the reason why you should wash your hands because of microbes. Nowhere does it give us useful information about how things really are. Nowhere does it give us like true moral lessons or anything like that. It just there's nothing productive. There's nothing about water purification or any of the things that you would, if you were going to have people live on this planet and you wanted to give them an introductory primer, like some kind of guide to the place, you would tell them, give them a map, or give them some, give them some instructions on how to make maps. Give them some kind of tutorial, like a primer, right, on living on the planet. No, we get none of that, but we get all this specificity for all these stupid fucking rituals.
On you can't say that no one is providing useful information. I just put the link to your stream with Intrepid Exotics in the live chat, so there's at least one.
Yeah, but you're not in the Bible, Peter. Now, in fairness
What?
to Yahweh,
Hold on. How many
Peter,
times is
he
Peter
does.
mentioned in the Bible? Just say.
Different Peter, you know that. But in fairness to Yahweh, if he had given instructions on map making, they couldn't have gotten lost in the desert for 40 years.
Oh, they weren't lost. They were being punished because Yahweh's a petty bitch. But
So you follow the river until it reaches the Mediterranean and turn right. Follow the beach until you get to Canaan. How difficult is that?
again,
No,
they were
very hard.
being punished
Archaeologists,
because
too.
God is a petty bitch.
Mm-hmm.
Not lost, just a dick. But I do have to say, because of course I learned all the Bible stories before I read the Bible. I learned them all from a very young age. And so my encounter with the term Nazarite was the Samson was to live as a Nazarite in the sense of not cutting his hair. Obviously, he skipped a little bit on the not partaking of strong drink or not being around dead bodies, considering how many people he killed. And then the bit about John the Baptist and how it was told his parents before he was born that he would live as a Nazarene and his food will be locusts and wild honey and he was never to touch a razor or anything. But in these instances, it was a lifelong matter. But here, where it's actually mentioned in the law, this is a vow that occurs for a set period of time. You shave your head at the beginning, you grow out your hair during, and then shave it off again and give it as an offering. So this seems to be similar to the magical hair, purified magical hair thing that we mentioned, and that has existed in many cultures. Also, in my translation, at least, it says that you may not have vinegar, which is from wine, which means
what verse?
in the very beginning, verse 5, no, verse 3. Wine and fermented
vinegar,
drink,
yes.
but also
Tomorrow will get to that.
vinegar made
Vinegar
from
of
wine or other fermented drink, which I mean,
Yeah.
that's. But then if you can't even have grape leaves, I can't have dolmades. I can't have a vinaigrette sauce. Like, bite me.
The Dolmades is pretty good, yeah.
Ugh.
I think in the case
Don't
of
touch the
Samson,
raspberry vinaigrette. That's all I'm gonna say. Ugh. Good stuff.
I think in the case of Samson, it was his mother consecrated him for life.
Yes.
Yeah,
Still kind of fits.
she had the that no drinking part especially. She had that. It was an expectation of her, but not for Samson. So that might be indicative of a changing tradition, or it might be indicative of the biblical author here, just kind of writing what he wants the Nazarites to be. So
You have a
I
flawed
don't know.
hero motif.
But yeah, it's yeah. Go ahead. Torah.
Yeah, I'll send my commentary. Verse 2. A man or a woman. Milgrom comments, the inclusion of the woman indicates that the Nazarite vow was widely practiced. The woman, however, needed the consent of her father or husband, as with all her other vows, as seen in 33 forward. At the end of the Second Temple period, many women took the vow, which accounts for the technical term for the female Nazarite, Nezirah, and for the many laws pertaining to her status, as seen in Mishnah Nazir 4:1 forward. A celebrated case of a woman Nazarite was Helena, the convert queen of Adiabene, who took a 7-year vow on the condition that her son returned safely from war, but her Nazarite period lasted twice or thrice as long, as seen in Mishnah Nazir 3:6. Berenice, sister of King Agrippa II, also took the vow when she recovered from illness, according to Josephus in Wars 2:15:1. A vow of dedication to the Lord. More accurate will be a Nazarite's vow to set himself apart to the Lord, as JPS renders. The root nun zain resh could denote dedication, consecration, or separation, as the BDB dictionary renders. Thus, the person separates himself from certain acts so that he could serve God, according to Ibn Ezra and Sfono, or he is separated or consecrated to God, according to Milgrom. Verse 3, several commentators tried to find a rationale behind this prohibition. According to the Book of Education, the Nazarite was to abstain from earthly pleasures and dedicate himself to God, and thus must abstain from any grape products which symbolize the pleasures of the world. Sfono writes that being a teetotaler reduces the urge to engage in demeaning activities due to drunkenness. Ashley, however, writes, it is not possible to recapture the rationale behind the prohibition of grape products. The Nazarites were asked for a higher level of consecration in this manner than the priests. Many scholars have seen this prohibition as a rejection of the evils of sedentary life in Canaan, which was known for its viticulture. Scholars often interpret the prohibition this way because of their assumption that the Nazarite office reflected in number 6 is a later post-conquest phenomenon. But in the narrative here, one can as easily see it as God's preparation of these people to live in a Canaanite culture as a different, i.e. Holy, people. The norm, not only in Canaan but elsewhere, was to drink wine and eat grapes. The Nazarites were marked out as special people, consecrated to Yahweh only. They were not to conform to the norms of everyday life. The same basic rationale may lie behind the other two prohibitions.
That's actually very astute in terms of an observation of what would keep practices like this going. We don't like to think it, but the truth of the matter is that if we are tricked into giving more to a cause, we are more likely to justify that cause as worthy in our own mind. The more people commit to something, the harder it is to leave. And the more rituals you go through to prove your fealty, the more you align yourself with this, the deeper your connection. And that can be a good and a bad thing, obviously. It's to be connected to a culture or to a family. Obviously, we're social creatures, we need that. But it's become so predatory in religion so quickly and so toxic. And I just, it gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Verse 4, seeds or skin. The Hebrew is chartzanim ve'ad zag. The identity of them is uncertain. While the usual interpretation is that they refer to the seeds and skin of the grape, as seen in Targum Onkelos, Rashi, BDP Dictionary, and Levine, the Septuagint reads pressed grapes to grapestone. Targum Pseudo Jonathan reads in the opposite order, husks of grapes even to the kernels. Verse 5, Licht comments that the long hair gave a physical and overt sign of the Nazarite's holiness. Ashley writes that the hair represented the life force of the person, and Sfono writes that by not coifying the hair through trimming to certain shapes, the Nazarite abandons all manner of peering himself.
Oh, all those split ends.
So obviously, in the Samson story, the hair is about strength. This isn't really all that different. This is kind of a it's strength in not a physical way, rather some some holy way, right? Because they have done this ritual to purify themselves, and now they grow their hair to show how devout they have been. And there, yeah, like Lilith said, there are a whole bunch of cultures that grew their hair long for the express purpose of devotion.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think it's possible that rather than the hair was the source of strength, the cutting the hair would have broken the vow and therefore would have defiled him, and then he would have lost the strength that was given to him for being in that state.
Sure.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it seems like in that the vow here, aside obviously from special cases of priests and prophets that are called to do some great thing, is that it has a beginning and end date. You're not a Nazarite for life normally. You take the vow and you grow your hair out for the duration of the vow, and then you cut it off, and that's the sacred pure hair from your time of devotion that is then given to God because it hasn't been, touched by impurity of joy or family affection or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, fuck those.
So throughout my teens and 20s, I could have gotten a job if I just told my prospective employers that I was a Nazarite.
Sounds like it.
Yep, makes sense.
Do
At least by
it.
this book.
Verse 6.
I took a Nazarite vow. Actually, that might get you a job in the States.
And some, I mean, where people have, are familiar with the Bible, so not the Bible Belt, but elsewhere.
Okay. Actually,
Oh,
yeah,
no,
that's a good point. People aren't familiar with the Bible, so
They're
you
familiar
would
with
That's true.
select parts of it. You could show them the verse, and as long as you spin it as you being very devout, they'll forgive you damn near anything.
Well, there's another problem living in the States because there was this one guy who said I admit I'm a bit pedantic, and they fired him because they thought that they didn't know the difference between pedantic and pedophile.
That's hilarious.
Oh my god.
Okay.
And that's
Like
not a
the
joke.
time-
That actually happened.
No, I believe it. That's like the time Ray
Oh.
Comfort had a temper tantrum because someone called him a bibliophile, and he thought it meant some kind of combination of Bible and pedophile as opposed to someone who was interested in books.
Unfortunately, it's not true. He's only interested in one book, and he doesn't even read that very well.
You beat me
Yeah.
to it, Ember. You beat me to it.
Mhm.
He's only
His
interested in
understanding of it
it
is
sexually,
below
not
mine at
emotionally.
8. So
Okay.
Not
Verse
bragging.
6. Verse 6. As noted by Sforno, Levine, Milgrom, and Licht, the restrictions imposed on the Nazarite were like those of the high priest, Leviticus 21:11, which indicates that a high degree of purity was basic for the Nazarite. Verse 9, in contrast with the layman who is contaminated by directly touching a corpse, as seen in Numbers 19 verses 11 to 22, the Nazarite could become impure by being in its presence, with Rashi interprets this, in his tent. Milgrom notes that the idea of impurity being contracted by sight was widely attested in the ancient world. He writes, Lucian, in the 2nd century CE, reports in D. Dea Syria 53 that in Syria, the pagan priests, known as Gali, who look upon a corpse had to undergo purification and could only enter the sanctuary the following day. In Rome, the high priest, called the Flamen Dialis, was prohibited from viewing a corpse. In ancient Greece, seeing the dead barred one from entering a temple. Ritual texts from Mesopotamia, earlier by 2 millennia, also indicate that impurity could be contracted, not only by priests, simply by looking upon a corpse. Verse 12, Levine comments, the obligation of the Nazarite who was unexpectedly defiled to offer an asham, guilt offering, requires comment. Strictly speaking, the asham was required only where ma'al had occurred, namely where there had been actual misappropriation of property, as in Leviticus 5 verses 40 to 16, 20 to 26, and Numbers 5 verses 5 to 10. What loss of property had occurred in the case of the Nazarite? Most likely, the Nazarite was regarded as a form of sacred property, for he was, after all, sacred to God. His defilement and the breach of his term of restriction constituted a loss to God, just as if sacred property had been taken from the sanctuary. No restitution of property would be required, but only a sacrifice in the form of a yearling lamb and, of course, the recommencing of the period of the vow. This process satisfied God's claim.
Yeah, so essentially, if they during the preparations for this, if they fucked up anywhere, or even if they were in a situation that would lead them to fuck up, they would have to start over again.
Verse 13, they are to be brought. The Hebrew Bible reads, he shall bring him or it. While the usual interpretation is that the Nazarite himself is brought before the tent of meeting, either by himself or by a priest, Rashbam writes that he brings the principal part of his sacrifice, and Licht comments that he brings the hair. Verse.
I'm sorry. The idea of any vow or sacred duty trying to keep me from standing by one of my loved ones as they died is. I'd like to see a god fucking try it.
Well, you're sounding awfully bitter there. This is your. It's like it's almost as if you're expecting that there's going to be wisdom in the Bible.
I'm sounding awfully bitter because I watched my father die this year.
I get it.
I sat beside him every minute, and I did not leave him. And if God himself had tried to make me leave that room, I would have stabbed him in the dick.
Well, we know he had one, apparently.
Okay,
attitudes like that is why God doesn't come around anymore. Everybody wants to, kill him or eat his body or stab him in the dick. He's afraid.
Good.
Rightly so.
He should be.
Okay, verse 14. Milgrom comments, the requirement for a purification offering presents an enigma. The Nazarite has successfully completed this vow. Had he contaminated the sanctuary by some major impurity, his Nazariteship would have been aborted, as in the previously mentioned case. Had he incurred some impurity or wrongdoing unknowingly, he could not have brought a purification offering, which requires awareness of the offense. It is Nachmanides who points to the most likely answer. His self-removal from the sacred to the profane realm requires sacrificial expiation. This expiation cannot be fulfilled by the reparation offering that is imposed only for illegitimate desanctification. The Nazarite's desanctification is perfectly legitimate. His sacred status more resembles that of property dedicated to the sanctuary, and then desanctified, that is, redeemed by a monetary fine. The use of the purification offering for this purpose is nonetheless unique. Verse 18, Ashley comments, this verse deals with the shaving of the Nazarite's hair. The ceremony takes place at the door of the tent of meeting. Scholars debate whether this ritual is another offering to God, i.e. the Nazarite offers the special mark of the consecration on the altar along with the peace offering, or whether it simply disposes of something holy, hence dangerous, i.e. it marks a step in the process of desacralization. Since no ceremony is described, it is probable that the latter is the case. Verse 19, the shoulder. Milgrom comments, the priestly right to the shoulder of the sacrificial animal has hallowed precedent both in the ancient Near East and in Israel. Egyptian rituals depicted on rock tombs and temple murals clearly show that the entire foreleg, including the shoulder, was carried in sacred processions and placed upon the god's table. Early Mesopotamian sources also verify that the shoulder was considered a sacred portion reserved for the gods and priests. For example, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Tablet 6, lines 161 and 167, the hero Gilgamesh, quote, served the shoulder from the bull of heaven and tossed it in her, i.e. Ishtar's, face, end quote. The shoulder was a sacred portion also among the Hittites, as seen in Anet, page 348, and the Jewish sect that lived at the Dead Sea awarded the shoulder to the Levites, as seen in the Temple Scroll 2015 forward and 67.
What is the best cut you can get off the shoulder?
I'm not a butcher, I'm sorry.
Ask the Texans.
Yeah,
when you're butchering the Bible, you should be a natural at it.
It is full of bull.
Yes, it is.
It is, but I don't particularly want to barbecue it. Well, not to eat anyway.
Yeah, that's
I
it.
think shoulder roast is about it.
Yeah.
I'm like mentally picturing the butchering diagram, but I don't have everything labeled in my head. But
no,
shoulder roast
is from the rump, is it not?
brisket, I think it's near the rear end, but
Not
it's
not like right at
around.
the
Yeah, it's
hip.
like yeah, backside of
I
the hip, I think.
You guys are
Aaron, do you
so
have any
easily
way to
distracted.
contribute this?
Listen, beef is
We're
important.
hungry, Aaron.
Do you know how long it's
Brisket,
been
so
since I had a
chill.
good steak? Probably the last time I saw you actually in real physical life. So I need
That was
steak.
actually pretty good. I almost never get a steak that's worth eating in a restaurant. The best
Really?
steaks that, well, apart from a hibachi grill, there was this one hibachi grill, but otherwise, the best steaks that I've ever had have been off my grill in my backyard.
Well,
Yeah.
that makes
Alberta
sense.
is cattle raising country, and they do take their steaks seriously, whatever their other faults might be. They know their way around cow.
I will
Yeah.
say that the shoulder here is boiled, and according to Milgrom, this indicates of the antiquity of the sacrifice.
Clever way to bring us back into the topic, Tomer.
Thank you.
Very nice, very nice.
Do you have any notes on the other food items?
Just when I think I'm away, they bring me
What?
back in.
No, I
Okay.
don't really have. I mean, we've already
All right.
discussed them in Leviticus, so
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, did we finish the commentary
Yes.
on this section?
yes, I did.
Okay, so I did have two questions. One is, it seems that this section, even though, as Aaron said, no one really keeps it these days, seems to have influenced both Christianity in a way and Islam in a way. So Islam, obviously, they don't drink wine. That seems to have some link. I don't know where it comes from. And then with Christianity, I've heard of this idea that, Jesus is called Jesus the Nazarite or Nazarene.
He's the
And there might have been
Nazarene,
a
but people have
confusion.
wondered about if that was somehow because John the Baptist appears to have actually lived, though the only idea of any association we have with Jesus is in the Gospels. And I'm personally of the opinion that they're trying to like retcon another cult under their heading with that story. But he's the one who lived like a Nazarite, didn't shave, didn't cut his hair, didn't drink wine, or just, lived in skins in the desert like a crazy unwashed hobo, which is, of course, the way God always wants his holy men to behave. And there's a reference to some prophecy that, that Jesus is supposed to have fulfilled. He will be called a Nazarene. Although, like, Lawrence, do you remember where that comes from?
The story about him being called a Nazarene.
Well, it says in the scripture, he will be called a Nazarene. I believe that's in Matthew.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I
which-
mean, whenever they cite these things, they're usually not prophecies, right?
Oh no, they're
so
not. But half
I-
of them aren't even in the in the Old Testament.
I don't
and
even
half of
remember
them are-
what verse they were citing.
Because they don't give it. They don't tell you. Like, at least there was, like, as it says in the prophet Isaiah, someone will be shouting in the wilderness, make ready a way for the Lord, make straight paths for him to follow. That at least you can frickin' find it. It's just like somewhere in the ancient writings it says he shall be called a Nazarene. No context.
Like I've heard of, like, maybe this is like a mythicist idea that, like, Nazareth the city didn't exist, and he was called a Nazarene because he was actually a Nazir, and then they retconned that he came from the city of Nazareth.
I
Something
mean,
like that.
It definitely was a real city. We have archaeological evidence for that.
whether
I'm
it was
saying
a real
that-
city at the time and how much of because it was a town that was so monumentally
Yeah, and I
tiny,
think
they would have had
there's a historicist argument that, yeah, he was from Nazareth, and they retconned the story of the Bethlehem story in order to fulfill prophecy.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
Like,
Mhm.
and
That's why
there's the
there's, like, these
idea
two
that
different places
the
and-
town of
yeah.
Nazareth was also retconned because any settlement that would have existed around that time was certainly not large enough to have a synagogue where he spoke and annoyed people to the point where they tried to throw him off a cliff, which also didn't exist in the area. Because
Yeah, they didn't have synagogues before the
yeah,
temple was destroyed.
I
really.
know. It was before it's another clear indication that the Gospels were written after the Second Temple destruction, and so after 70 AD. But of course, they can't accept that because that means they're not eyewitness accounts. And shut up, Jesus is real. We must have faith, etc.
And some people even do accept that they were written later, but by eyewitnesses who are now very old.
Very
that is another way to go.
Yes, I do love how the illiterate people are writing in highly classical Greek, and they don't understand the education system at all, because like we are taught to read fairly young and read novels, so composition tends to be absorbed more naturally in our education system, whereas simply being able to read enough to tell that you were paying the right price at market was a huge thing. Being able to write enough to copy out someone else's thought was another step. Being able to compose your own thoughts articulately was a whole third tier of education that most people never got anywhere near. So yeah, the idea that illiterate fishermen are suddenly writing in polished Greek
well, that's
6 years
why
later is the stupidest shit I've ever heard in my life.
that's
Oh, it's
why they
God
had to wait
inspired,
until they
though.
were 90 years old to write, so they had time to learn.
What about the classical depiction of Jesus with long hair? Is there any connection between that and
Yeah, probably.
this
Blonde,
idea?
long
I'd say
hair.
probably.
Well,
I'm
we
sure
know
he
the
died.
stories about Leonardo's lover / the bastard child of the Pope are somewhat exaggerated. But yeah, it's to say
He didn't
that
die.
people have
He didn't die and come back 3 days later. He dyed his hair, and it took 3 days for it to wash out.
Oh, that's what it was all along. Everything makes sense now.
it was all a bad dye job.
That's why he
I've
was
got
in
a
the
couple of
cave. He
comments.
was shamed. I get it.
Got a couple of comments to read. Eric Wander says, "How is Lalandra doing?" Lalandra will not be on the show any longer. She's enrolled in classes. I thought it was for a PhD, but it's not. She's doing some kind of certificate. But anyway, she's in school again. So that's where she's spending all of her time now.
Good for her.
And then another comment from Truthful Serpent offers $5. Thank you. It says, money for Aaron, the Serpent of Truth. Thanks for trying to clear my name, Aaron. This is Truthful Serpent. Indeed, I spoke only truth that day in the garden.
It's
Yeah.
true.
Well,
all right.
I'll be fucked. A serpent can talk.
Hey, or at least type well enough to do a super chat. So
Yeah.
Shall we move on to the next segment?
I guess.
Yep. Who's reading this one?
I got yelled at, so I
Hi
can't.
there.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
When Moses finished setting up the tabernacle, he anointed and consecrated it and all its furnishings.
Wait. Where are you?
No, it's
7.
verse
No,
22.
No, we
the
went
next
six.
section-
Six.
Oh,
Went
I thought we were done
6:22.
with that one.
No,
Okay.
no.
No,
we
we have
got
more.
to do the little
The
priestly
form of blessing.
blessing from 22 to 27.
Oh,
Just
okay.
before
Do
7.
this.
Yes.
Allow me to
That's
finish this
right.
last bit because there's a bunch of.
Yep,
Okay, here
finish
we go.
that.
Okay, the form of blessing. Yahweh spoke to Moses and said, "Say this to Aaron and his sons. This is how you are to bless the sons of Israel. You shall say to them, May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh let his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May Yahweh uncover his face to you and bring you peace. This is how that they are to call down the name of the sons of Israel, and I will bless them." I'm done.
That is the priestly blessing, and it's considered one of the earliest section of the Bible. The Ketef Hinnom scrolls, dated from around the late 7th to early 6th century BCE, contain a variation of verses 24 to 26 and are considered the earliest quotation of the Bible in existence. Ashley,
But what about
however, writes...
informants?
What?
Never mind. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't get that. So, Ashley writes, while it is true that the amulets called Ketef Hinnom 1 and Ketef Hinnom 2 use mostly the same words as number 6, their existence only states that such a benediction was extended toward the end of the Judean monarchy. They do not prove that the age of the benediction itself belongs to the 7th or 6th century, or that the Book of Numbers was in its final form by that time. Indeed, Mark Awabdi has carefully traced the formulaic roots of the elements of this blessing back to the one form of divine blessing known from Akkadian, Middle Hittite, and Ugaritic correspondence beginning well back into antiquity, 12th century BCE, the time of Moses, and going forward from there.
Yeah, so this is like you said, probably not a quotation of numbers. Rather, it contains the same kind of idea behind it, and there has been some speculation about it being preserved by the Zadokites, for example, which was a break off of the Aaronid priesthood, and they got into their own little power struggle. So we'll get more into that later. But the idea was that this was something that was preserved for a while, and it probably doesn't, like, in my view, it probably doesn't go back further than like when were the Zadokites around? Was that ninth?
You mean the Zadokites or the Sadducees?
No, Zadokites.
Oh.
Yeah.
I believe the history of the Zadokite section of the priesthood is somewhat reflected in the story of the switchover, the curse from Eli under Samuel, and then this tale of how David, his high priest, is the last of that line and replaced under Solomon, and it's part of the whole, David commanding that Solomon kill everybody who is part of the old regime on his deathbed, because that's just the kind of guy David was. Man after God's own heart. You served me faithfully for years, but you kind of pissed me off at the end, so I'll make sure my kid kills you.
Which, by the way, David and Jonathan, totally into each other.
Oh, yeah.
Totally
when we'll get
They
to that, we'll see.
undress in front of each other. They love each other beyond the love of women.
Well,
Wow.
I've read some theories that say that it doesn't, but when we'll get to that, we'll discuss this.
Listen, I mean, that's definitely the idea I got while reading it. I was like, these two dudes are into each other.
Anyone
Okay.
but lovers. Mystery
Get a
hates
buff of
the
Kinda
Gilgamesh,
like-
lovers.
perhaps.
Kind of
sorry.
like Gilgamesh and Enkidu.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Enkidu was seduced by the woman in the field, granted, but he and
Shamhat
Gilgamesh,
the harlot.
were, yeah.
I got the
Hey,
same vibes.
Mhm.
See, I got a joke for you.
determination to
Gilgamesh
slaughter
love
all the
Enkidu?
descendants of
Enkidu did.
Saul. He takes care of Jonathan's crippled son for love of him.
How did we get
So
to
David
there?
was not a dick.
So we're
One
talking
time.
I
about
thought we
the
were talking about
early-
the priestly section.
we're talking about the
and
early
we-
monarchy and the
Ah.
Zadokites and stuff. But
Yeah.
the vibes I got from that were the same as Achilles and Patroclus.
Yeah.
I have two comments on this, the priestly blessing. So first on 25, make his face shine on you. Several ancient Near Eastern texts use the term shining of the face to indicate joy and satisfaction. For example, in the prologue to the Code of Hammurabi, section 17, Hammurabi is described as the devout prince who brightens the face of the god Tishbak. Levine comments, the concept of light, more precisely the light of the countenance, is clarified by several biblical statements. In Ecclesiastes 8:1, we read, a man's skill lights up, ta'il, his face, so that the severity of his face is changed for the better. In other words, when one's face lights up, quote unquote, he is well disposed, which is the antithesis of a fierce countenance, which conveys an unkind disposition. In anticipation of further reference to God's countenance, let it be said that the countenance of God was believed to be a potent force. When God is well disposed, his face rings blessings and power, but when he is ill disposed, his face shows it, and danger follows.
So when her face is shiny, that's a sign of joy and satisfaction.
Please don't.
Don't. Oh God, no.
Yeah,
Maybe
I was
your
always curious.
satisfaction. It's no, but those are idioms we still use in English. A smile lights up their face, blah blah blah, that kind of thing. Stop being a pervert.
I just love Tomer's reaction to that.
Fair enough. But I'd always been curious about that type of blessing with the, may the God shine his face upon you, whatever. Because of the earlier stuff about how no one can ever see God, and it reminds me a lot of how other similar blessings talk about the sun shining upon you. Is it supposed to be a reference to like Zoroastrianism or something where God and sun are equal?
Well, the thing is, might have, of course, its origins in sun worship, right? But that spanned like so many cultures, especially in the ancient Near East. and that phraseology can be seen in not only Mesopotamian literature, Akkadian, Egyptian. It's seen everywhere. It was, if you have God's favor, it has that shining kind of, that radiance associated with it.
Mhm. Well, and on holiness too. I mean, Moses' face glowed with holy light after he came down from the mountain. It's. I think we need to, we poke fun at a lot of literalists about some of the stupid shit they say, and rightly so. But we need to remember that these idioms, speaking about talking from your heart or your face is positively glowing with joy or whatever, are very natural to all languages. And we like our language would be utterly impoverished if we didn't allow ourselves to speak that way. So it's the to say that God's hand is on someone doesn't mean he's going around like this. It
That
it's
would be fun though.
it would be funny. Admittedly, he would probably have a bigger hand, but it's the idea of he's guiding that person and focused on that person. The face turned towards you doesn't mean you're actually looking at his face and being burned to a crisp like Semele or the dudes in the Raiders of the Lost Ark. It means he considers you with favor, and that would be a blessing. It's we shouldn't do what we hate so much in others and be unjust in a refusal to use poetic language in the way that it is obviously intended in all languages, including our own.
My final comment here in verse 27, they will put my name on the Israelites. Avishur comments, the meaning of putting the Lord's name on the Israelites is abstract, and here it symbolizes God's ownership over the Israelites, since putting the name of someone on a certain object indicates his ownership on that object. Ancient Near Eastern kings put their names, quote unquote, on places and objects to indicate their ownership upon them. In the Karatepe bilingual, Azatiwada, king of Adanawa, marvels that he made a city and placed there a gate where he put his name on it. He warns with a curse any king who wishes to erase his name from the gate and put his own name on it. The biblical writing uses an expression that is taken from the royal style when it speaks of God's relation with his people, end quote. Milgrom writes that the Ketef Hinnom scrolls demonstrate that this was also taken literally, since people wore the priestly blessing on the body in the form of amulets, and thus they literally put the Lord's name upon them.
Magic amulets, that sounds
Yeah.
right. But with the king, reminds me of Nebuchadnezzar, how he put had his name stamped on the bricks on the inside of where they were built and the great archway, so that even if someone tried to erase his name and put their name afterwards, if you took apart you'd see Nebuchadnezzar's name on the inside of the building of it, so nobody could claim that they had done it.
The other thing that's difficult about erasing it is the name itself, Nebuchadnezzar. I mean,
say that 5 times fast.
Well,
Well,
admittedly, it wasn't
considering
written in English.
The cuneiform, maybe it was it was faster writing down.
Yeah, it was like 2 letters in the original script.
Just get some glitter and glue and fill in the.
Gosh, imagine how his soul must have been torn apart by all those Horcruxes, man.
They say every time Mitch McConnell glitches, it's because they destroyed another Horcrux.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, I'm gonna remember that. Oh, that's good. That's good.
Okay, chapter 7.
Wait, that one thing.
All right, now just remember
no,
this.
No. Isaac wanted to say something. Yeah.
Sorry. One thing I find interesting about the priestly blessing is it says God speaks to Moses. This is how they should bless them. Say this, and what they actually say is the entire section, starting from God spoke to Moses saying, "You should bless them," saying this, blah 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 blah. They say the entire thing as part of the blessing.
They don't just say
They don't just say the 3 lines.
Strange. I wonder why they do that. Any ideas?
A lot of times prayers are like that. They just take the whole section. And
Not the verse that I've known, but then again,
well, I mean, Hebrew prayers. Yeah, it's just,
Well, you
I guess
gotta
it's
make
like an
sure you get the right
introductory
magic
part.
words in there.
right?
it's like an introduction, but it does flow nicely. So
Yeah, actually, the structure of it as well. The first line is 3 words. The second line is 5. The third is 7. So you see this kind of typology there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, in Hebrew
also
at
true.
least.
It's I've heard it put to music many times in choral arrangements and songs. It's a good text for that, even in translation.
and I
Okay,
think there's also a
Klaatu,
Yeah.
Barada, necktie.
Give a
No,
record.
close
Nene
enough.
mene tekel ufarsim.
Anal nathrak vud thos
Oh, the
bethud
other one.
dokiel
Yeah, I
dienne.
saw that painting recently.
All right, so I'm going to move into.
I think it's Rembrandt's.
Yes.
Yeah, you remember.
It always sounds better in the original
Yeah.
Klingon after all, Aaron.
It's true.
Okay, so moving into chapter 7, just remember all the specificity that God provides for this, and not for any. This is a timeless message for all people of all times, but it only applies to these people at this time. The people who were alive then. It only applied then to those people in that specific spot, and no one else ever. Okay.
Read up to
When
11.
Okay. When Moses finished setting up the tabernacle, he anointed and consecrated it and all its furnishings. He also anointed and consecrated the altar and all its utensils. Then the leaders of Israel, the heads of families who were the tribal leaders in charge of those who were counted, made offerings. They brought as their gifts before the Lord 6 covered carts and 12 oxen, an ox from each leader and a cart from every 2. These they presented before the tabernacle. The Lord said to Moses, "Accept these from them, that they may be used in the work of the tent of the meeting. Give them to the Levites as each man's work requires." So Moses took the carts and oxen and gave them to the Levites. He gave 2 carts and 4 oxen to the Gershonites as their work required, and he gave 4 carts and 8 oxen to the Meritites as their work required. They were all under the direction of Ithamar, son of Aaron, the priest. But Moses did not give any to the Kohathites. Kohathites. Whatever who the fuck those people are. Because they were to carry on their shoulders the holy things for which they were responsible. When the altar was anointed, the leaders brought their offerings for its dedication and presented them before the altar. For the Lord had said to Moses, "Each day one leader is to bring his offering for the dedication of the altar." The one who brought his offering on the first day
No.
was
That's it.
Nashon.
That's
Okay.
I told up to 11.
Okay.
So
The next bit is
That was just so riveting
very
and
repetitive.
exciting and so
Mhm,
important for timeless messages we all need to know. Exactly how much these idiots were paid to spill shit on the tabernacle.
I'm staggered.
Yeah.
Well, you just have to stop expecting Christianity to be consistent, because they're the ones who say that this is a timeless message for all time. Correct me if I'm wrong, please, the 3 literal Jews we have here, but as I understand it, the Jewish people are not quite so grand in their claims for every little bit of the law. Like,
Mm.
this
Sorry?
is not meant. Do Jewish people regard this as the timeless word of God for all people at all times? This section.
I think mainly Orthodox.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're Orthodox and you consider the entire Tanakh to be, divinely inspired, or
Magic.
so not necessarily this is applicable, but you can maybe learn something out of it. And they try to find there's a lot of symbology in like this chapter according to the rabbinic tradition. Like the
So
numbers given and even the gematria of different words and stuff.
How many
Um,
brilliant minds have been wasted trying to contrive meaning from this shit?
Yeah.
and now I have an introduction to this chapter. So Milgrom comments, "It is not clear why this document concerning the initiatory gifts of the tribal chieftains was placed here. Ibn Ezra conjectures that the previously mentioned priestly blessing, to be identified with Aaron's blessing, recited at the end of the first public service, Leviticus 9, verses 22 to 23, and that immediately after the blessing, the chieftains brought their gifts. The context, however, offers another, more plausible reason. In chapter 4, the Levites had been assigned their transport duties. The carts required for the Gershonite and Merarite labors are now donated by the chieftains, verses 1 to 9. The altar gifts of the chieftains, verses 10 to 88, are incidental and are included only because they form part of the same archival document.
Yeah, so it might be the fact that it would, I guess in this case, chapters 5 and 6 would have been, kind of stamped on later, because like if this does certainly align closer to the stuff of chapters 1 and 4, 1 through 4. In fact, a lot of people have even thought that it was literarily dependent on it. I don't know if I'd go that far, but yeah, there's a much more obvious connection to that. Although the I'll get into it in the next section once we read all the counts of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, but
Isaac and I
Kovacs
had to
had
take
the
turns.
extra special super magic stuff from the inner sanctum. So they had to carry it themselves and not touch it because otherwise they would be smited.
Yeah,
my
someone had to carry that
smite.
down.
Moat.
Verse 1, Levine comments, the opening verse recalls Exodus 40 verses 9 to 11 and Leviticus 8:10, both of which speak of the anointing of the tabernacle. Textually, this recollection represents considerable distance, but chronologically, all of the activities described and prescribed in the Torah between Exodus 40 and number 7 occurred within only a few weeks. Although no dates are given in the book of Leviticus or for any event, the entire context of Leviticus belongs as well to the beginning of the wilderness period, according to the priestly chronology. Verse 3, covered carts. In Hebrew, it's eglot tzav. The word tzav appears in Isaiah 66:20 in the plural form, tzavim. The KJV and NIV rendition comes from the Septuagint, Vulgate, and Targum Onkelos. The Peshitta renders carts set in order, and Targum Jonathan, carts covered and fitted. According to Weinfeld, the Akkadian cognate tsumbu means wheel or wagon, as well as the Egyptian jebwu. And before the tabernacle, Milgrom comments, neither the wood of the carts nor their animals were destined for the altar, and hence were ineligible to enter the sacred area, which was reserved for the people's sacred sacrifice alone. The Midrash, Sefer Numbers 45 and Numbers Rabbah 12:16, explained that the haste with which the chieftains made this donation compensated for the way that delayed their donation of materials for the building of the tabernacle. They had waited until after the people had oversubscribed, quote unquote, the tabernacle needs in Exodus 36, verses 5 to 7, leaving only the jewels for the high priest's garment for the chieftains to contribute, Exodus 35:27.
So let the poor pick up the slack and we'll come in at the end and act like heroes to get the last little bit. Yeah, that never happens in religion.
Sections 12 to 88. I think Isaac and I need to take turns.
It's
I'll
going to
read
be
this-
it's very repetitive.
Yeah, but
It is.
we need. Yes, but we need.
I did practice it.
Me too. I'll read
Good.
the first half, and you'll read the second half.
Sure.
Okay. The one who presented his offering on the first day was Nachshon, son of Aminadav of the tribe of Judah. His offering, 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekels and 1 silver basin of 70 shekels by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering. 1 goat ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram, and 1 lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, 1 goat for a sin offering, and for his sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Nachshon, son of Aminadab. On the second day, Nethanel, son of Tzuar, chieftain of Issachar, made his offering. He presented as his offering 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekels and 1 silver basin of 70 shekels by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering, 1 gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram, and 1 lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, 1 goat for a sin offering, and for his sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Nethanel, son of Tzual. On the third day, it was the chieftain of the Zebulonites, Eliav, son of Chelon. His offering, 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekels and 1 silver basin of 70 shekels by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering, 1 gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, one bull of the herd, one ram, and one lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, one goat for a sin offering, and for a sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Eliav, son of Chelon. On the fourth day, it was the chieftain of the Reubenites, Elitzur, son of
Which verse are you commenting on
Shteu,
now?
30. His offering, one silver bowl weighing
Because we've only
130
read up to
shekels,
11, right?
and one silver basin of 70 hang on shekels up by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering, one gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, one bull of the herd, one ram, one
Take a
lamb in its
breath,
first
my
year
guy.
for a burnt offering, one goat for a sin offering, and for sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 gold rings, and 5 yearling lambs. That was the
Nice.
offering. That was the offering of Elitzur, son of Shedi'u. On the fifth day, it was the chieftain of the Simeonites, Shelumiel, son of Tsuri Shaddai. His offering, one silver bowl weighing 130 shekels, and one silver basin of 70 shekels by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour and oil mixed in, for a meal offering. One gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, one bull of the herd, one ram, and one lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, one goat for a sin offering, and for a sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Shelumiel, son of Tsuri Shaddai. On the
One
sixth day,
ram,
it,
one lamb, one slam, one pam.
Whoa.
Wham.
And a partridge in a
Thank you,
pear
ma'am.
tree.
Oh,
on the sixth
Now,
day, it was the chieftain
can we
of,
digest what you just said, please? Because that's a lot.
well, it's
Wait.
And it doesn't.
Rumble,
I don't
rumble.
even have to read it now because I mean, Tomer just like, okay, read up to
Oh,
11, and I'll
man.
read the commentary for the entire fucking thing.
that's not commentary. That's the verses.
That's the text.
That's the text. Yeah.
Oh,
On the sixth day, it was the chieftain of the Gadites, Eliasaph, son of Deuel. His offering, one silver bowl weighing 130 shekels, and one silver basin of 70 shekels by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in, for a meal offering. One gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, one bull of the herd, one ram, and one lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, one goat for a sin offering, and for a sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Eliasaph, son of Deuel. Isaac, your turn.
oh.
Do you have any comments or whatever?
Okay.
Break it up
Nope.
a bit.
I just wanted to try to make it sound dramatic that he gave 3 goats. And I
Wait,
guess
do
it's
you want me to be
a
as
big
fast as
fucking
possible?
deal.
But I don't think
5
anyone
goats.
cares what the words actually say because it's just a repetition.
It's repetitive.
It's
yes.
literally the same words again and again. The only
Oh,
difference.
Yeah,
man.
I mean there are variations, but it's basically like
Oh, yeah.
the same thing.
Well,
let's
I
go.
guess
That
these
was a
guys are
marathon,
important enough.
Tomer.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
important enough that every little thing they give needs to be recorded. And I don't know how big that altar was, but goddamn, that was a big barbecue.
Well, they
wait,
did it
Yeah,
one
That
day.
would
at
be a
time.
party,
Very
all
hungry.
right.
All right,
Yeah.
let's go.
I haven't had
On the
breakfast
seventh
yet,
day
brother.
was the
It's just torture.
chieftains of the Ephraimites, Elishama, son of Ammihud. His offering, one silver bowl weighing 130 shekels, and one silver basin of 70 shekels by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering. One gold ladle
Because
of
this
10
is so
shekels
important.
filled with incense, one bull of the herd,
God.
one ram, and one lamb in its first year for
All
a
right.
burnt offering, one
Game Boy
goat for a
time.
sin offering. And for his sacrifices of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Elishama, son of Ammihud. On the 8th day, it was the chieftains of the Manassites, Gamliel, son of Pedatsur. His offering, one silver bowl weighing 130 shekels, and one silver basin of 70 shekels by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour, with oil mixed in for a meal offering, one gold ladle of 10
No,
shekels.
you're
filled with
not.
incense.
This is the Bible. You're not giving it the gravitas it deserves, right?
It
His
doesn't
offering was
deserve any
one
gravitas.
bowl for
Yes, right.
130 shekels. I mean,
Listen,
no,
listen.
you all right.
If I were
silver
P,
plate.
if I were P Town, I would be zoned out.
I was
Like
just
he
saying,
isn't.
this
Oh,
is-
no, this
no
is-
wonder
this is
he's
always
not here
going
today. It's
out.
because of this nonsense.
Especially when
Man.
I read. He always zones out when I read.
This
Yeah.
sounds
You
worse
think
than
One bull of
He actually
worst
knew this was
recipe
shopping
book I've
list
ever
day.
read.
Let Isaac finish, please.
This is a
Yeah,
recipe
but I
book
think
right
this
here.
bit isn't interesting enough for other people to read, so I'll just.
Are we
zoom
reading
through it,
Betty Crocker right now, or is it
and then we'll
just
get
me?
to the interesting stuff as soon as possible.
Okay.
One bull
Yeah,
of the herd, one ram, one lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, one goat for a sin offering, and for his sacrifices of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Gamliel, son of Pedatsur. On
Yes,
the
there were
ninth
5
day, it
she
was-
goats, but 2 of them were virgins.
We need to let Isaac finish because
Yeah.
don't we all love it when Isaac finishes?
Giggity.
He's gay.
Well,
I'm
we know
not
that
part
some
of that
people do.
conversation.
Yes,
On
and
the
we
ninth
wanna
day, it was
see
the
that.
chieftains of the Benjaminites. Avidan, son of Gidoni. His offering 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekels and 1 silver basin of 70 shekels by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering. 1 gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense. 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram, and 1 lamb in its first year for a burnt offering. 1 goat for a sin offering. And for his sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Abidan, son of Gidoni. On the
Cool.
10th day, it was the chieftains of the Danites, Achiezer, son of Ammishaddai. His offering 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekels and 1 silver basin of 70 shekels by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering. 1 gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, and 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram, and 1 lamb in its first year for a burnt offering. 1 goat for a sin offering. And for his sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, and 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Achiezer, son of Ammishaddai. On the 11th day was the chieftains of the Asherites, Pagiel, son of Ochran. His offering, 1 silver bowl, weighing 130 shekels, and 1 silver basin of 70 shekels by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering. 1 gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense. 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram, and 1 lamb in its first year for a burnt offering. 1 goat for a sin offering, and for a sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Pagiel, son of Ochran. On the 12th day, finally, it was the chieftain of the Naphtalites, Achira, son of Enan. His offering 1 silver bowl weighing 130 shekels, and 1 silver basin of 70 shekels by the sanctuary weight, both filled with choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering. 1 gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense. 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram, and 1 lamb in its first year for a burnt offering. 1 goat for a sin offering, and for his sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 yearling lambs. That was the offering of Achira, son of Enan. That was the dedication offering for the altar from the chieftains of Israel upon its being anointed. Silver bowls, 12. Silver basins, 12. Gold ladles, 12. Silver per bowl, 130. Per basin, 70. Total silver vessels, 2,400 sanctuary shekels. The gold ladles filled with incense, 10 sanctuary shekels per ladle. Total gold of the ladles, 120. Total of herd offerings for burnt offerings, 12 bulls. Of rams, 12. Of yearling lambs, 12, with their proper meal offerings. Of goats for sin offerings, 12. Total of herd animals for sacrifices of well-being, 24 bulls. Of rams, 60. Of he-goats, 60. Of yearling lambs, 60. That was the dedication offering for the altar after its anointing. When Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak with God, he would hear the voice addressing him from above the cover that was on top of the ark of the pact between the 2 cherubim. Thus God spoke to him.
Yeah, so
And
quite a slog, quite the list.
Yeah.
The form and function is basically the same as every other kind of tally you've ever seen. I think there are parallels to this in Ezra and Chronicles as well. There are other inscriptions from the area. There are other Mesopotamian artifacts that show, like, here's how much this person brought, here's how much this other person brought. It's basically just I forget what it's called. Like a ledger, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Receipt.
So yeah, a receipt. There you go. Receipt works well too.
That Ionassar guy, I tells you.
Ashley offers as well a rationale behind this section. Quote, the author may have wanted the cumulative effect that results from a reading of the account of 12 identical offerings. By repetition, the authors show that each tribe had an equal stake in the support of the sacrificial ministry of the tabernacle. No tribe had a monopoly on the responsibility for support, and no tribe was unnecessary. That the support came from the tribes themselves rather than from the priests or Levites is also significant. The outcome of a partnership in the support of the ministry is seen in the last verse of the chapter. And I have a note, and I have a note on the verse 12 about Nachshon. He is the only one of the chieftains who is not explicitly called a chieftain. And Numbers Rabbah 13:17 gives a rationale for this. Quote, if he should ever feel tempted to lord it over the other chieftains by saying, I am your king since I was the first to present the offering, they could retort by saying, you are no more than a commoner, for every one of the others is called a chieftain, while you are not described as a chieftain.
Yeah, I did notice that. The only variation in this, because this is every one of the 12 tribes, which is something of a misnomer, because Ephraim and Manasseh, the sons of Joseph, are listed separately. But of course, Levi, being the priests, doesn't contribute, because they are the ones being contributed to, in actual fact. But the list of the 12 tribes does not go according to their birth order originally, which would be Reuben first. It goes according to the, we have to knock off the first two or three from the list of rightful successors for various reasons that Jacob gave, and then start again with Judah. So you end up with Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and then bounce back to Reuben, Simeon, Gad, and the rest of the sons in order, and ending, of course, with actually.
And then, of course, what is not remembered here is the strange traveler, Rochester, offered a 4-barrel quadrajet carburetor in 750 CFM. But this was not recorded because no one yet knew what to do with it.
God has an aversion to iron chariots.
Yeah,
It's true.
I should
definitely
get
a
myself an
problem
iron
for him.
ring to keep the evil away from me.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that being discovered in the sand after all those years?
Now that
Can
might
you
be
imagine
an
bringing this grocery list to the tent of meeting and somehow knowing that people will be looking over the ledger of what you brought 3,000 plus years later?
I should note that the last verse here is also like a bit obscure. Even Ashley writes, commentators have noted that 789 is a difficult and obscure verse. Several have seen it as a fragment of another tradition that has come into the text. It concludes this chapter by introducing materials that are not obviously connected to it. Admittedly, the verse is difficult and introduces elements not in the near context. I mean,
there is a rabbinic idea that this verse reconciles two separate verses that contradict each other. So there is a verse that says that the voice of God will emanate from between the between the cherubim on the lid, and there's another place that says from within the tent of meeting his voice will come out. And so this verse kind of says when he goes into the tent of meeting, he would hear the voice from between the cherubim, and then it would, so it kind of reconciles that.
So a dramatic voice of a proposed deity comes from behind a curtain to dictate that people should do incredibly self-serving or him-serving things. Where did I see that before? There was a dog?
Toto, is that you?
No, that wasn't me. I should note that in the speak
Sorry,
with the Lord.
Tome, not Toto. I
Yeah, sorry.
Nice. That's good.
Yeah,
I'm
there
gonna
you
start
go.
calling you
Well-
Toto from now on.
He does have very
Please
poofy
don't.
hair.
Please
He
don't.
does.
To speak with the Lord. Hebrew Bible reads to speak with him. As Ashley notes, the reference to God as him has no clear antecedent in the rest of the chapter. While the Septuagint solves this problem by reading the voice of the Lord, Ashley writes that this is a secondary interpretation designed to ease the problem. The Vulgate reads to consult the oracle, and Peshitta omits this phrase. Licht writes that this hints to Exodus 25:22, quote, "There I will meet with you and I will speak with you," end quote.
So God has preferred pronouns.
I am he.
Oof.
Yeah, I don't see how Christians don't understand it. Like, God has a gender. He doesn't have sex. He does have sex in Christianity, but
Details.
Creation. Phrasing.
Well, that depends. I
But he
mean,
doesn't-
there's a Athera, Ashera, Atherat. There was
Asher?
there was the whole
Ashera.
X thing.
Yeah, but that's an earlier version of God that was retconned out because he has to be more divine than to, give women any respect.
Yeah, I'm saying to modern religious people, like God
Yeah.
doesn't have a body, he doesn't have a sex, but you still gender him. So
God
you
is
understand that there's a
spirit,
difference between
yeah.
sex and gender.
But we're made in His
You
image,
should understand it.
which means that if we're made in the image of God, then God has 2 pectoral mammae and utterly useless nipples.
And opposable thumbs, fingerprints.
Does
That
he
was my
have
argument
My
with the Mormon
husband.
missionaries, by the way, because the Mormons like to argue that God has a body. I'm like, okay, so he exists everywhere and everywhen throughout the entire multiverse, but his arms reach this far, and he has lungs. Why?
How else is he supposed to breathe in space?
Because they're prettier than gills.
I just want to point out this chapter is so that they have divulged in discussing details about theories about Dune, and I'm loving it.
Arn, you should
The weather like on
Spice,
Kolob.
spice is life.
Arn, you should
It's
read
a spice
Professor
of life, yeah.
Stavropoulos' book about God. He's got some nice genitals as well. I think she has an entire
Yeah,
chapter on that.
I mean,
I was
we
gonna
could
recommend it.
just
Starts off-
ask Ultimated about God's genitals.
Oh, no.
Let me ask a question about that. I mean, one, it's important that we know whose God has the biggest dick, but the other thing is God circumcised?
Would be.
These are things I don't want to think about.
In
Arn,
his
that's why he's
for
outside of
example,
space and
Tiamat,
time, out of reach of the knives
they
of people.
killed Tiamat to make the heavens and the earth. The body of Tiamat made the heavens and the earth. Maybe
That's why
God
he's afraid of
decided he
iron.
didn't like his dick skin and circumcised himself, and that's where we get the disc earth.
That's why he's afraid of iron, guys. Yeah.
He was hurt before, and he can't get over
The
it.
world used
Yeah.
the Earth used to be flat, but then it got excited.
Nice. No, yeah, I was also going to recommend Stavropoulos' book on that. It's called God and Anatomy, and she starts off by talking about God's body and how the bodies of deities were seen throughout the ancient Near East. Lilith, you mentioned Tiamat being kind of ripped apart and formed into the universe, right? Where he uses her body to create everything. This this idea of God having a body, he of course is spoken like he's spoken of in ways that it sounds like he has a body, right? They've described his hands, especially his lungs, his ears, his nose, all that stuff, right? Because that was just the ancient conception of deities. They had forms. Now the form wasn't always like on earth or anything. Like usually it'd be like up in heaven, or sometimes they'd be like enormous, like spanning from the earth to the heavens. So they had a lot of different conceptions of the sizes of these deities. Sorry.
But in general, when the 72 elders went up to look upon God's visage, and they commented about the azure platform at his feet, they noted that he was 15 feet tall and had 3 legs. Oh wait, it's only actually 2 legs, but it looks like.
Look for the man with the glowing head.
Is this God a tapir?
Oh my god, I hate this.
On that note,
And the behemoth's tail
Yeah.
swung between its legs. There you go.
Yeah, I suggest that
As
we
a
should move to chapter
cedar.
8. We should move to chapter 8 and forget everything that we said.
there's nothing interesting. I mean, do people want to hear the
Fair.
symbolism that the rabbi is trying to impose on this chapter?
If you've got
Is there-
something to contribute, I'm keen to hear it.
It's mostly things like the numbers represent things. Let me see. Where does it start off? So
All right,
some of them are
magic
really
numbers
weird.
first.
So I'm sure most of you are familiar with gematria, right? The idea of each letter in
Yeah.
the Hebrew alphabet represents a letter.
Yeah.
But there are other like code systems where like you can switch the first letter with the last letter and stuff like that. So sometimes they're like, oh, this word is equal to this if you switch the first letter to another letter based on this system. It's really stupid. And I think he does that for one of these. So let's see.
Like a really
yeah,
bad
so
cipher.
the silver bowl, a silver bowl weighing 130 shekels. So according to that, the 130 shekels represents Adam's age when he started having children. And the Hebrew word karat kesef, silver bowl, the gematria is 930, or I think, which is his age or whatever. Right. Then the next one is like 70 shekels, and that represents Noah's age, the 70 nations, and the gematria with the weird switcheroo.
So
How do they come to those conclusions, though? How do they come to that
inconsistent
conclusion?
method?
Oh no, they pulled this out of their ass.
Magic number,
That's my
match
point.
other magic numbers, special magic numbers.
Yeah,
magic,
the gold
yay,
ladle
God.
of 10 shekels represents the Torah, like 10
Commandments.
The 10 Commandments or whatever. And then the bull, the herd is Abraham. The ram is Isaac because he was replaced with a ram. One lamb in its first year for Jacob because it says something I can't remember. And then a sin offering is a goat, which represents Joseph being sold and being they used a goat blood, blah blah blah. And then you've got 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he goats, 5 yearling lambs. Actually, no, I think the 5 rams, 5 he goats, 5 yearling lambs was the 5 books, the 10 Commandments plus something else. Yeah, it's a bit silly.
5 books of the Pentateuch.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
it's just a whole collection of ifs. If it actually represents this, then that's how much this is. If it does this, it does that. I'm not trying to make a joke.
Well, there's only
numbers
the
doesn't
gematria. They
add
only
up
uses it for 2 words. It doesn't.
It's
use it for the rest of them.
pareidolia.
It's just.
It is
quite
pareidolia.
explicit.
It's pareidolia in a very
absolutely.
real way, and it's incredible to me.
Yeah. I mean, the patriarchs fits in quite nicely, but we don't know which came first, the interpretation or the let's make the numbers this. Let's put it in this order to represent,
well,
the patriarchs or whatever.
If you regard things divisible by 12 as frequently as sacred numbers, and you have the same from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, look, you're going to get your magic numbers. Look, ain't that convenient?
Yeah, it's the same with why is there are 6 wagons, 12 oxen, right? Like why is it not 12 wagons? Why didn't each tribe give a whole wagon? Why half a wagon?
Half a wagon and an ox.
Because 6 represents blah blah blah, and also to represent unity or something.
We'll go in halvesies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing.
Okay, I've got a comment that I've got to read here. This is Kicker White Lion, who offers 50 Czech kroner and says, "Poor Tomer, his purity and innocence are being ruined here."
Our sweet
he just
boy.
wanted to do math and Bible commentary.
I have to say, Tomer, I know you wouldn't have appreciated this position, but you would have totally been the Sunday school teacher's pet.
I mean, I was not the Sunday school, but the teachers. So.
It was Saturday school, but okay.
Well, we don't have schools on Sabbath, so.
Hey, I was that teacher's pet until the day I decided to be Moses and lead us to freedom because it was a fucking boring lesson.
I think you haven't read 2 comments as well.
Yeah, did we read that other one?
No, I don't think you did.
All right, hold on a second. So Trevor Wright says, number 6 relates to the Nazarite vow, and Jesus was called a Nazarene, but known for living in Galilee. Why was this connection made? Being a Nazarene doesn't imply messiahship, right?
I think we talked about
it. I know that Lawrence will probably correct me, but I just want to throw out here what was my understanding. It seemed to be that the story of Jesus growing up in 3 different places, having a childhood in 3 different places, which at that time was rare, right? That this was all written in order to fulfill a handful of prophecies at once.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I am a mythicist because of how obviously fictionalized so much of the story of Jesus is. That doesn't mean a dude did not exist. It just means nothing we know about him appears to be based in any kind of factual reality. everything is about fulfilling a prophecy or necessitating an illustration for a theological point or hearkening back to a previous prophet. And the Nazirite vow does have associations with prophets. But then early Jesus wasn't God yet. He was special Messiah prophet, you know, and then he eventually became like demigod and then eventually God. And then we had, you know, people killing each other for the Trinity because yay, no hate like Christian love.
I was under the
You have
impression
to-
that there were a number of the apostles or people who were involved in the early parts of the story were possibly raised in those stories, and those were actually their stories, and they just attributed it eventually to Jesus to fill those prophecies also.
There were lots of
I've heard of
lots
that's
of
kind of what I
messianic
found out when I was reading that
characters
too.
mentioned by Josephus in the parts that were not invented, and lots of them take the name Jesus, which was also
That's
Joshua
right.
and prophetic for, you
Yeshua.
know,
Mm-hmm.
reclaiming the promised land, yada yada yada. So
Because I think
yeah,
it's just some schmuck named Jesus, and that just happened to be, you know, the guy that they made him to the Messiah. I think that's kind
Or
of what happened.
multiple schmucks named
Or
Yeshua, who
multiple
eventually
schmucks.
got amalgamated.
Well, yeah, there
Exactly.
were
Well, it's definitely multiple schmucks. They may
There's a
not
lot
all
of
have been named Yeshua. I mean,
Right.
because we know that there was one named John,
Yep.
John the Baptist.
There was
And
there
his
was like
story
Theudas.
was-
Yeah, Theudas.
I'm sorry?
There's the Egyptian, like Josephus. Yeah, mentions quite a few people going around, you know, claiming to be the Messiah, right? And
John's story is very, very similar to
I think
Jesus'
Theodas
story.
as well. Yeah.
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 But Jesus would have been a prophetic name to take on, like
Right.
to say we're going to
Deliverer.
reclaim our land, like Joshua did.
Mhm.
Like
Well,
that.
I want to hear what Lawrence has to say
Sorry,
about this
sorry.
because he
Yeah.
Yeah, so Josephus records multiple people going around at the time claiming to be the Messiah, right, and trying to, you know, as being like an end time prophet, right. So he describes each of them as, you know, going certain places, preaching certain things, right, but they are always somehow trying to fulfill prophecy in some sense. So in my view, Jesus was just another strand of the same kind of the same ilk, right?
Mm.
So
Mhm.
he just would have been the one that got the most popular over time, and that would be, of course, in part due to the mythological attributions to him.
Mhm.
And of course, that would be, you know, later, far later. But I think that the most we can say about the historical Jesus was that he was an apocalyptic Jewish prophet.
Yep.
And
He was one of many, and he just happened to be
after
rounded up. That's the whole thing.
sorry. I was just going
I
to
just
say
want
that.
to say you
Yeah.
first. You first.
Oh, I was just going to say that it's also possible for multiple different storylines to get confused when passed down through oral history after a people lose a war and are scattered and they're trying to talk about this prophet. And, you know, everything is very telephone games. So you could easily get accounts from 6 different people being attributed to the same guy through the natural confusion that would arise.
Okay, so
just
just let me substitute for P-Town for a moment.
Uh-oh.
But when Jesus was pointlessly killed on the cross, that was a great achievement.
So the
wanna-
Romans would like to always kill rabble rousers, anyone who went against the whole, order of things. And so if you are a doom preacher, for example, who has a crowd of people and you make a lot of problems, well, they're like, well, we don't like you, so we're just going to go ahead and kill you. And they did this quite a bit. And so you can see a lot of these different types of prophets that you will hear about, like John getting his head cut off and everything else. All those things come from causing problems for the Romans. And they execute people on crosses. X's, by the way, as a form of crucifixion, because it's a way to say, hey, see this guy over here who's horribly in pain? Don't do what this guy does and shut up. But
It's a
then they say, it's
for truth and
like
tolerance.
revolution now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I just wanted
It's
to
Amber.
I just wanted to
Amber,
interject.
you
Are we
might
going
want to
read
open a
Numbers
door.
I think we were going to.
Yeah, that bee is going to sting you,
yet?
but
Yeah, but I'm seeing comments piling up.
No, it's just because Bree showed up.
Okay. All right, so I'll read through the comments. Celion D says, okay, so when we read about the offerings, how is that any different to the ones that, to some Egyptian temple? Was not the big plan to stop mimicking those pagans?
Well, yeah, but not in the way that you don't still record how much the important people gave so that they can have their ego boosted.
Yeah,
I
this is
mean,
just
come on.
bureaucracy. This
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
bureaucratic.
that's all it is.
I don't think this had
Nothing
any.
nothing is blasphemous when it regards to bureaucracy. I don't know. Nothing is heathenous.
So
Practices
three
done by
things in
one
life are
religion.
certainty.
Practices
English
by one
broke,
religion
sorry.
will also be used by a different religion too, because they think that this is a good way of making people follow the religion. It's the same type of practice. It's just one is taken from it's just our way is a little different than their way is. But that's why we see so many similar rituals and things all throughout that part of the world. It's just for that reason alone.
Now,
Make
then we have
much of
another
any
comment from
difference.
Slava Ukraini. Offers $5.
Slava Ukraini, yeah.
First stream on this series. Thanks for the great effort. Thank you very much for that. And then Silvio George Pantalemon says, I have a stupid question. If Judaism influenced the core of Christianity, is there anything in Judaism that is influenced by Christianity?
The verses
But-
in the Bible. It's
Yeah, the
very
verses
in
the
it's,
Bible.
it's
Yeah, that's
Christian.
true.
Yeah.
But
the
if we're
chapters
talking,
and
if
the-
we're
They
talking about
eventually kind of
theologically,
wove together at some point.
if we're talking about theologically, there were mostly a lot of rabbinic commentary in the in the period following the first century would have been would have kind of been like polemics or specifically written to counter Christian claims. So their theology had to get more detailed just to counter those Christian claims. I forget who wrote or who compiled the series of books on it, but there's a series of books that is just rabbinic polemics or rabbinic attacks or responses to Christians. This also kind of happened in during the Crusades. Even I actually wrote a paper on this. That during the Crusades, there was a change in the Jewish view on the afterlife. So yeah, it's
Oh, really?
if anyone's interested in that, I could like post
Things
the
like that
paper
do
to the
happen when you're
Discord.
getting slaughtered. And
I've been
Yeah,
meaning to
I would
ask
like to
you
see
about
that.
this for some time, Lawrence, because I was aware of that. But I mean, I wasn't aware of when, but I mean, aware that obviously there had been a change. That at one point, the Jews appeared to have the same belief essentially as the Greeks, that everybody, regardless of the deeds done in life, that everybody goes to the one and only land of the dead. And then later, there's this incorporation of a hell with the devil in it, apparently. And all of this seems to have been, culturally appropriated, or just people being raised around this idea until they kind of incorporated it into their own belief system.
Yeah, the Gospels make reference to Hades several times. Hades has no power over Jesus. He rose again. I'm like, why are you talking about another divine system? What's going on here?
It was just the world of the dead. They just used the word for the world of the dead.
The word hell
that was used at the
from
time.
the Norse goddess
Hades.
of the dead as well, and her realm.
In the
already
Hebrew
discussed
Bible,
this in
in
the
the
previous-
in the Hebrew Bible, does it make reference to Hades, or does it always exclusively refer to Sheol?
Well, it would say Sheol, right? But the thing is, in
Yeah.
Greek translations, it
It's
would
a
say Hades, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
But the
one
thing
of-
is,
and thank you for that.
There was a lot of changes for the afterlife. I did a very short video on it. I could have done better, honestly. I'll probably remake it, but it's called a brief history of hell. But there's
Jewish people call like heaven, like heaven they call Shemayim, but when they talk about like the heaven where you go to when you die, they actually normally say Gan Eden, which means the Garden of Eden. There's like a spiritual Garden of Eden, which is kind of like
because
Kinda like
the
heaven.
whole idea is you're supposed to be in the end times you'd be resurrected is the thing.
I remember in one of the stories Jesus told the parable of Lazarus, which I maintain was the blueprint in Luke for what eventually ended up becoming a supposedly biographical story in John. He talks about the righteous poor man being gathered to Abraham's bosom, which sounds like something similar to that, something vaguely heavenish, but without the later sort of kingdom associations. Is that a concept that was part of Judaism at all? Or because honestly, at this point, I'm convinced Christianity is a Greek fan fiction of Judaism.
Well, yes,
Yeah,
and
I mean,
I would say
Rabbinic
that
Judaism did
Islam
develop.
Islam is largely, not entirely, but largely fan fiction of Christianity as well. A certain subset of Christianity.
Yep.
And none of them are exclusively, like, you can't say that this religion is based on this one, because they're never based on one. You know, you have to look at the culture. The cultures will be influenced by all of the other cultures around it, and there will be, like in the case of Judaism, for example. Judaism obviously has inspiration drawing from Mesopotamian mythos, but then also coming from Persia, because they have clear indications of Zoroastrianism influence. And I've read where some scholars have said that Zoroastrianism has had more influence over Judaism than any other group. But we can't say that Judaism is based on Zoroastrianism, nor that it's necessarily, although it clearly does have a lot of mythology that is rooted in the Mesopotamian mythos, we can't say that that this one came from that. It's all these collective influences.
Yeah.
And Mormonism is a fan fiction written by children with crayon.
Joseph Smith was way too much of a pervert to be considered a child, although he might have written it with crayon. But
People entertaining.
I honestly, one of the things that helped break a lot of my indoctrination was the realization of the incoherence of the concept of God. And I realized that God that, you know, I had believed in and been taught was basically the equivalent of like chewed gum that had been rolled through a junkyard and had just picked up like a bit of this, a chunk of that, a pinch of this, a bit of that. It was just a clusterfuck of, it just picked up some random shit as it rolled over. And none of it had any relation to anything else. And it was just all stuck.
It's a giant katamari.
Gotcha. It's the creationist tornado in a junkyard metaphor.
Yeah.
Which was, I think, beautifully expressed.
Something that dumb.
I think that was beautifully expressed in the movie Big Trouble in Little China, where, you know, at the end, you have this guy explaining how Chinese religion came about. We pick a little bit of this and a little bit of this, just, and you know, ball it all together, which is the same thing that Amber was just saying. I've got a couple more. One more comment here. Hivesci offers $2 and says 300K, meaning 300,000 subscribers. Congrats, Aaron. Thank you very much for that.
Very, very good.
Numbers 8 is relatively short, and I'm going to run through it if I may.
Sure.
Okay. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to Aaron and say to him, when you set up the lamps, see that all 7 light up the area in front of the lampstand." Aaron did so. He set up the lamps so that they faced forward on the lampstand, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. This is how the lampstand was made. It was made of hammered gold from its base to its blossoms. The lampstand was made exactly like the pattern the Lord had shown to Moses. Are we talking about a menorah here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
The menorah, yeah.
Yay.
I like that unambiguous answer. Thank you, Tomer.
You're welcome.
And then the Lord said to Moses, "Take the Levites from among all the Israelites and make them ceremonially clean. To purify them, do this. Sprinkle the water of cleansing on them, that they have to shave their whole bodies and wash their clothes, and so they will purify themselves. Have them take a young bull with its grain offering and the finest flour mixed with olive oil. Then you are to take a second bull for a sin offering. Bring the Levites to the front of the tent of meeting and assemble the whole Israelite community. You are to bring the Levites before the Lord, and the Israelites are to lay their hands on them. Aaron is to present the Levites before the Lord as a wave offering from the Israelites so that they may be ready to do the work of the Lord. Then the Levites are to lay their hands on the heads of the bulls, using one as a sin offering for the Lord and the other as a burnt offering, to make atonement for the Levites. Have the Levites stand in front of Aaron and his sons, and then present them as a wave offering to the Lord. In this way, you are to set the Levites apart from the other Israelites, and the Levites will be mine. After you have purified the Levites and presented them as a wave offering, they are to come do their work at the tent of meeting. They are the Israelites who are to be given wholly to me. I have taken them as my own, in place of the firstborn, the first male offering from every Israelite woman. Every firstborn male in Israel, whether human or animal, is mine. When I struck down all the firstborn of Egypt, I set them apart for myself, and I have taken the Levites in place of the firstborn sons of Israel. From among all the Levites, I have given the Levites as gifts to Aaron and his sons to do the work of the tent of meeting on behalf of the Israelites, and to make atonement for them, so that no plague will strike the Israelites when they go near the sanctuary. Moses, Aaron, and the whole Israelite community did with the Levites just as the Lord commanded Moses. The Levites purified themselves and washed their clothes. Then Aaron presented them as a wave offering before the Lord, and he made atonement for them to purify them. After that, the Levites came to do their work at the tent of meeting under the supervision of Aaron and his sons. They did with the Levites just as the Lord commanded Moses. The Lord said to Moses, "This applies to the Levites. Men 25 years old or more shall come take part in the work of the tent of meeting. But at the age of 50, they must retire from their regular service and work no longer. They may assist their brothers in performing their duties at the tent of meeting, but they themselves must not do the work. This, then, is how you are to assign the responsibilities of the Levites."
Wow,
Now, I have a
retirement age has
question on
changed.
all of. I'm sorry?
Retirement age has changed a lot.
Yes, 50. Can you imagine retiring at 50?
Oh, I
Wow.
love it.
That's only for
Yeah.
the priests.
I do have a question, though, because there was a lot of this where it implied that they were going to be sacrificed. You
Nope.
lay the hands upon the bulls, and the bulls are going to be sacrificed. But they
figurative.
were also supposed. I know, but they're also supposed to lay the hands upon the Levites. I'm a little confused, so I would appreciate some clarification.
They do. There is a bit where Aaron designates them as an elevation offering to the Lord. So
Yeah.
he picks them up and waves them around,
Which is a neat trick.
funny
Yeah, I
trick.
have a comment by.
Tribe.
Woo!
I remember.
I
I remember
have-
coloring that in you know, in school. You know, the picture of Aaron lifting up a person like this.
Yeah, I have a comment on this by Levine, but it's essentially all figurative.
Good work on the
I don't think
deadlift.
it was meant to be taken literally.
Well, yeah,
I-
well, it certainly wasn't for any sacrificial reasons or anything. But this is, you know, for the Levites especially, this was their lot, right? Because they didn't get a land, so this was the consecration of their service. So there, you know, honestly, there were like a lot of this stuff we have covered before about the consecration of the Levites. The one thing, right, is that this just has a different beginning date, right, or beginning age for them to start. This is the third tradition, right? The third tradition of their beginning age.
I think so.
That we've covered because
but
we had one in
it's-
we have
yeah.
one throughout the book, right, and then we have one in Numbers 4, and then here is the third one.
And they're
For counting, it's from 30, but they start
30 to
service at
50.
20. Yeah.
Seem to be the years of sacred service, at least. Although presumably they might have something else to do, maybe apprenticeship prior. I have to say, though, this is probably the best example of what you've mentioned several times, Lawrence, which is the bit where you clearly see that a previous incarnation, a previous tradition of offering the firstborn to the Lord, potentially as the priesthood. Your eldest goes and is a priest. Everybody's eldest son is a priest, if they have one. It is then superseded by the Levite tradition, and there's an explicit mention of, instead of taking your firstborn sons, I will take the Levites as my priests. So it's explicit in the changeover. What's only been we've only inferred up to this point.
Yeah, I should point out that again, as I've noted in Leviticus 3, there is no reference to the child sacrifice, as Heath Durrell notes. So
could be very old. Yeah, so it's possible that there was a historical time when the firstborns did serve in like the Israelite community, whatever, and then they became Levites. And then this is I don't know, not a polemic, whatever, but this is trying to explain it and saying, well, actually, it was always the Levites, and God, the firstborns are just only for that short period in the desert, like after the Exodus, and you know.
Also, if you think about it, like the age thing, right, and for how long you were to serve, that would be enough time to maybe, in their mind, raise the next generation of Levites.
I can see that.
Okay, I'll start my commentary. Verse 2, when you set up. The Hebrew, it's beha'alotecha. The rendering of this word to set up or mount appears in the Septuagint, Vulgate, and supported by Licht, Ashley, and Levine, since he'elah means to mount. However, Peshitta, Targums, and Saadia Gaon, followed by traditional commentators and Milgrom, interpret to kindle. Milgrom writes that since mounting, positioning, and lighting of the lamps were all part of the same operation, the verb he'elah could imply all these acts. He further notes that in Leviticus 24:2, the word leha'alot refers to lightning of the lampstand. Verse 7, the water of cleaning. The Hebrew reads mei chata'at. The word chata'at refers to the sin offering, as seen in verse 8, and to the ashes of the red cow, according to 19:9. Some, like Rashi, Milgrom, and Licht, wrote that the water of impurity, in Hebrew mei nidah, described in 9:19, is the water of cleaning, created by mixing the water up with the ashes of the red cow. Levine, however, rejects this and interprets mei nidah as water of lustration, or water for sprinkling, based on the proposition that the root nun dalet hey is a variant of nun zayin hey, to spatter. Verse 11.
So baptism by sprinkling, yeah.
Yeah, the purification ritual with the ashes of the red heifer is interesting because it purifies you from the highest degree of purity of impurity, but the person who sprinkles becomes impure. So it's like an endless cycle where if you are the one who purifies the people through sprinkling on them, you then have to be like, you become impure and you have to get purified through the same ritual later.
Wash your clothes and be unclean till evening, kind of a vibe.
Yeah, and this day, Orthodox Jews that are like anticipating the coming of the Messiah, there is like a group that are actually looking for a perfect, unblemished red heifer, and like they'll pay a lot of money for it. So,
and there are hysterical American evangelicals trying to breed it for them.
Right? Yeah, you see a lot of news stories. News stories about this unblemished cow.
Yeah, once it got to 19,
but it has to be perfectly red. It can't be even one white or white.
And not a single hair can curl, because that might mean that something had been put on its shoulders and it might have done something like work.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Verse 11, a wave offering. Levine comments, this verse and the several that follow define the dedication of the Levites as an act similar to its effect to the tnufa, presentation or wave offering. The verb henif means to raise, and this mode of presentation is described in the Mishnah, Menachot 5:6. The offering was not waved, quote unquote, as many have explained it, but was rather carried to and fro while being held high in order to display the offering before the deity. Usage here is more figurative than literal. Referring to the Levites as a tenufa merely meant that they were being presented to God as an offering, me'et bnei Israel, on behalf of the Israelite people. Verse 16, to be given wholly to me. Hebrew it's netunim hemali. And Milgrom comments, the root nun taf nun is the technical term to designate the nature of the Levites' relationship to the Lord, compare 18:6. This relationship is accurately described by Targum Onkelos, which renders dedicated to God here and transmitted to Aaron in verse 19 and 3:9. By this ritual, the Levites are assigned to the Lord, who then reassigns them to the priests. This usage of Natan is found in other similar biblical contexts. Hannah vows that she will dedicate Titen, her son Samuel, to the Lord in 1 Samuel 1:11. Joshua assigned or dedicated in Hebrew Natan the Gibeonites as manual laborers in the temple, Joshua 9:26. Later, we read of a class of temple servants called Netinim, who were assigned Netunim to the Levites in Ezra 8:2. And finally, on verse 24, 25 years old or more. The problem is that this statement contradicts the starting age of 30 described in the census, seen in 4 verses 3, 23, and 30. The Septuagint tries to resolve this problem by replacing 30 in chapter 4 to 25, as I've noted previously. Chazal in the Sifrei Numbers 62 and Talmud Chulin 24a, followed by Rashi, Rashbam, and Gersonides, wrote that the Levite entered the training at the age of 25 and entered service at the age of 30. The Qumran sectarians in the Rule of the Congregation 1 verses 12 to 19 and War Scroll 7:3 applied the ages not just to the Levites, but to the entire community, reading the word tzava in verse 4:3 and 8:24, translated to take part in the NIV as army, and thus interpreted the text as referring to military training at age 25 and an enrollment at age 30. Milgrom proposed that this reflects varying traditions, with Licht suggesting that this section was added as a correction to chapter 4. Ashley, however, writes, simply to assert that in chapter 4 we have a different tradition than in chapter 8 means that the final redactor of the text allowed these contradictions to exist within 200 verses of one another because they were in sacred source material, or perhaps that no ancient readers would be expected to read through the text of the book of Numbers. To make sense out of the change in age here, one must assume that there was a literary strategy, or that something happened in the story, or was perceived to have happened, whatever the age of the traditions involved. And that's it for my
Ashley is the Christian commentator, right?
Yes, yes.
40-year-old soldier, she said. Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah,
Yes,
my
that's it.
one other comment, interestingly, it was from Levine actually. So the root of the word menorah, there's a cognate that can be found in South Arabian that could lend some credence to a Midianite hypothesis that I thought was interesting. Meaning so it would mean to shine or light.
Okay.
Wait, yeah, it's very similar to the word for light, candle. Yeah.
It's
This
interesting.
little light of mine.
I'll never let it shine. But it's something in many religious traditions that to keep a sacred light burning. And I mean, that's the miracle of Hanukkah, right? That the lamps kept burning despite the fact that they had no oil. So it was, sacred, blah, blah, blah. And, tragedies are written for the Greek gods that, some virgin dallied, some ritual, virgin from the temple dallied with her lover and let the sacred flame die, and it could only be relit when she was killed. I mean, is that what happened in Aida? No, that was a different one. But yeah, like that's definitely a sacred fire that must be maintained with ritual strictness on certain terms. It's a very common ceremonial practice, and well, all those parts of the world.
Aaron, you're muted.
Aaron, you're muted.
Yeah, you muted.
Yep.
Aaron. I think it's
Are we still all good for Tuesday?
Yes.
Yeah, Tuesday should work for me. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Lawrence, what are you doing tomorrow?
Man, I am doing we're continuing Revelation tomorrow, and then I go to work all day. There is a slight chance that he might give me the day off, but that is, as of right now, I work tomorrow. Like immediately after the show, I go and open and work until midnight. So,
Oof.
yeah, my Sundays are booked. Why would you have in mind?
No, I just wanted you to advertise your show.
Okay, sweet. Yeah. Definitely go watch our continuation of Revelation. We'll be getting into, I believe, the Four Horsemen. So
Oh.
I loved researching the Four Horsemen. I did a video on Heavenly Horsemen. So it'd be nice to kind of talk about that stuff again, because there are a lot of interpretations, but I think as it's just a compounding of or a reimagining of biblical motifs about the end times, or Old Testament motifs about the end times. And if for anyone that's interested, I dropped in the Discord in the Humanities channel. I dropped my paper on how the Crusades changed theology. So, yeah, if anyone's interested in that.
I just have one question about the Four Horsemen. Are they real horses, or do they have two halves of coconut and they're clacking them together?
I don't get that reference.
Monty Python.
Monty Python, my guy.
Okay.
How have you not seen the Holy
Blasphemy.
Grail?
Ember.
Oh my god!
Because he's a boy. That's an
you know,
old movie.
I have seen that movie. I just don't remember that much of it.
Oh,
Okay.
You
Grapes for Robin?
blaspheme,
I
my
saw it
child.
once, maybe 10 years ago. So.
honor, dishonor on you, dishonor on your cow and your coconut.
And now
You must
should
rectify
channeling
this
Mushu.
iniquity, or I shall taunt you a second time.
Ember, we have to find a
All
way
right,
of getting
yeah.
your little mouth to work on that. That's
I know. I
brilliant.
gotta animate the puppet.
Oh yeah,
Yes, you do.
that's perfect.
That would be fun.
All right. Well, I got another stream with Intrepid Exotics in a couple of hours on snakes. We're not talking about religion. We're just talking about snakes.
Link is in the chat.
Change the topic.
Link is in the chat for that one.
Yep. Thank you very much. Everybody check out Lawrence's show. Lawrence, go watch Monty fucking Python.
Study that one. Yes.
Right now.
It would be impossible for you to be a Bible scholar if you were not also fluent in that movie.
The Holy Grail
I
and the
want
life
you.
of Brian.
I want you
Like
to
I said, I
recite
saw it a
the
long time ago.
holy prayer for the holy hand grenade next time we see you.
I don't think I will.
You're not a proper nerd until you're fluent. in
That's
that movie.
true. That's true.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.